So hi, welcome to this episode of History Hunters. I'm here again at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Glendale, California, and I wanted to check out a number of graves of some very significant Hollywood people. We're going to start out with the grave of Tom Mix, the famous Western movie star who died in 1940 outside of Florence, Arizona, in a tragic car accident. So when I look at this grave, I can't help but think about the fact that this man helped carry the casket of Wyatt Earp in 1929. Tom Mix is buried at the top of the hill, just inside the entrance. So on the grave of Tom Mix, you see his very distinctive signature in his TM cattle brand. This plaque has been out here in the Southern California sun for about 82 years. Tom Mix was a huge Hollywood legend, but he's just about been forgotten. His death was a great shock to millions of Americans. He was only 60 years old. There was a throng of about 2,000 people who attended his graveside service here that October 1940. I saw one photograph where some boys who obviously looked up to him as a matinee idol, standing at his coffin at his funeral in some funeral parlor. But I can only imagine how confused they must have felt. Maybe the pain that they felt seeing their hero lifeless and dead in a coffin. Thomas Edwin Mix lived from 1880 to October 12, 1940. He was a star in many early Western films between 1909 and 1935. He appeared in 291 films, all but 9 which were silent movies. In 1905, Mix rode in President Theodore Roosevelt's inaugural parade with a group of 50 horsemen led by Seth Bullock, some of them being former Rough Riders. Years later, Hollywood publicists muddled this event to imply that Mix had been a Rough Rider himself. As a young boy, Tom learned how to ride horses and aspired to becoming a circus performer. It is rumored that his parents caught him practicing knife-throwing tricks against a wall, using his sister as an assistant. Tom Mix's acting career made him a very wealthy man, wealthy enough to afford extravagant cars like his prized 1937 Acord Phaeton. The radical new design was an exciting one. For one thing, its nose completely replaced the traditional radiator grille in favor of horizontal louvers that curved all around the sides. The design earned it the nickname of Coffin Nose, a chilling observation in Mix's case. On October 12, 1940, Mix was driving in Arizona from Tucson to Phoenix. About 18 miles south of Florence, Mix suddenly came upon a bridge washed away by a flash flood. He only had time to swerve and overturned his car in a gully. A large aluminum suitcase containing cash and other valuables on the shelf behind him hurled forward and struck him, breaking his neck. The car that carried Mix to his death, the 1937 Acord Phaeton, has been restored by Arizona collector Bob White after a 2-year effort at a cost of $600,000. And here we find the grave of Richard Dix. He was a popular actor as well. 1893 to 1949, devoted husband and father, loved by all who knew him. And the words of Jesus, "Lo, I am with you always." And there's a likeness of Jesus standing with his arms open. Dix died of a heart attack after years of fighting alcoholism. And right next to him is his son, Richard Dix Jr., who lived from 1935 to 1953. The boy was only 18 years old when he was killed in a logging accident while working in the timber industry somewhere here in California. One of the few actors to successfully bridge the transition from silent films to talkies, Dix's best remembered early role was in Cecil B. DeMille's silent version of the Ten Commandments in 1923. Dix appeared in such films as the 1938 movie Day of Reckoning.
This is my wife.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, boy.
Oh, she's lovelier than that. What's going to become of her?
Dix starred in another RKO adventure, The Lost Squadron. He was nominated for the 1931 Academy Award for Best Actor for his lead role in the epic film Cimarron. If you ever come to Forest Lawn, you have to check out this grave. Probably the most prolific actor here. So here's the very simple grave of James Maitland Stewart, lived from May 20th, 1908 to July 2nd, 1997. For he shall give his angels charge over thee to keep thee in thy ways, all thy ways. Somebody's left some mementos here, American flag, some roses. And next to him is his wife, Gloria Hattrick Stewart. She lived from 1918 to 1994. So she passed away before Jimmy did by over 3 years. In our most loving memories, she will always be with us. She made life better. Imagine that Jimmy Stewart stood over this grave. And then what a lot of people don't know is that buried next to Gloria is her son. It was Jimmy's stepson, Ronald Walsh Mclean. He was a first lieutenant in the Marines. He was killed in Vietnam, June 8th, 1969. He that dwelleth in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. And as you can see there, Vietnam is written on his marker, and there's also the Marine insignia with the eagle standing on top of the globe. I do have to say that Jimmy's got quite a view of Glendale and Burbank. Jimmy Stewart was such a prolific actor, but I think my favorite film of his is It's a Wonderful Life. But Liberty Valance is also a good film. He was also in The Shootist, which was John Wayne's last movie, so that's a pretty cool designation. So I found the grave of Joe Cobb, lived from 1916 to 2002. He was an actor, and while it's not politically correct to say this, he was the original fat kid from the Hal Roach Our Game comedy series. He was born in Shawnee, Oklahoma in 1916 and was actually discovered while vacationing with his dad in Los Angeles. He appeared in 86 episodes of Our Gang and made the transition successfully from silent films to talkies. So way off in the distance over in that direction is the Great Mausoleum, and if you come right over here to the Veil of Memory section, you will find the final resting place of an early Hollywood stuntman and Western film actor, Art Acord, who lived from 1890 to 1931. He had a pretty illustrious movie career at the time, but hardly anybody today remembers who he is. Right in the middle of his marker is a Veterans of Foreign Wars emblem, VFW, because he served in World War I. There's also the inscription, Our Pal, Art Acord. He became a rodeo cowboy and was one of the few to have ridden the acclaimed bucking horse Steamboat, who later inspired the bucking horse logo on the Wyoming license plate for the full 8 seconds. His rodeo skills were sharpened when he worked for the Miller Brothers' Traveling 101 Ranch Wild West show, where he became friends with Tom Mix, Yakima Canute, Bronco Billy Anderson, and Hoot Gibson. Between 1910 and 1929, Acord made over 100 short films, mostly westerns, and most of which are now believed lost forever. His lifelong fight with alcoholism had taken its toll. He played in a few sound films at the end of his career, but by the time of his last silent film, The White Outlaw in 1929, he was looking tired and worn out. He would sometimes disappear for days at a time, causing a shutdown in film production. He ended up performing in road shows and mining in Mexico. His cause of death was cyanide poisoning in Chihuahua, Mexico. Although Mexican police officially listed his death as suicide, his friends suspected that he had been murdered by a Mexican politician who caught Art having an affair with his wife. Now, the guy who created Forest Lawn Memorial Park, Mr. Eaton, wanted this to be a beautiful place because he considered most modern cemeteries to be very unsightly, very ugly, and very depressing. He wanted this place to be a nice place to visit, and you see this statuary right here. It's pretty cool, made out of marble. The marker for Mr. Overell, Walter Edward Overell, died in 1947. So off to the left you will see the Great Mausoleum, and I'm going to walk up the hill here to talk to you about this elaborate grave up here. It's for Aimee Simple Mcpherson. She lived from 1890 to 1944. She was a Pentecostal evangelist and somewhat of a media celebrity in the 1920s and 30s. She was famous for founding the Foursquare Church. She pioneered the use of radio broadcasting to spread out the word of religious services and appeal for donations. Her Angelus Temple was an early megachurch that fed the poor and tended to the needs of the needy. In her time, she was probably the most publicized Protestant evangelist, even surpassing the very famous Billy Sunday.
This is her first appearance on a national broadcast, and we are very happy to have with us Aimee Simple Mcpherson.
Angela's Temple, myself as pastor of the temple, was the first church in the world to own a radio station. And when those shining silver towers were lifted up above our temple dome and flashed the message east, west, north, and south, our opportunity and privilege was broadened by hundreds of thousands of people who united with our radio church audience. But now, with the talking, moving picture, comes the great privilege of getting out the message to the ends of the earth.
She conducted public faith healing demonstrations also that attracted tens of thousands. So in 1926, it was alleged that she faked her own kidnapping for publicity reasons. It was on May 18, 1926, when Mcpherson completely disappeared from Ocean Beach there in Santa Monica. Everyone thought she had drowned, but searches for her body were in vain. The disappearance was kind of the same media spectacle that we saw during the Gabby Petito Brian Laundrie tragedy. After weeks of unpromising leads, Mildred Kennedy believed that her daughter was dead. The temple was actually preparing a memorial service for her on June 23rd, over a month after she disappeared. And then Mcpherson suddenly shows up alive in a hospital in Douglas, Arizona, and she gave a spiel about what happened to her. She said that she was at the beach when she was approached by a couple who came up to her and wanted her to pray over their sick child. They all walked over to her car, and she was shoved inside, and she was made to pass out with some kind of drug-laced cloth held against her face. Eventually, she ends up in a shack in a Mexican desert, and when her captives left her in the building, she managed to escape out the window, and she traveled through the desert for some 11, 13 hours, or an estimated 20 miles before reaching some border town. That's really mysterious because nobody really knows if it was true, but that's what she said happened. So when she came back to Los Angeles, though, a crowd of about 30,000 to 50,000 people wanted to come out and see her. It's quite a media spectacle as well. So it was in September of 1944 that Mcpherson went up to Oakland for a series of revivals. She was planning to preach her popular Story of My Life sermon. When Mcpherson's son checked on her in her hotel room at 10 o'clock in the morning, he found her unconscious with pills and a half-empty bottle of capsules nearby, and she was dead within less than an hour. This is a must-see. Look at the statuary on this thing. It's the grave of Joe E. Brown, famous comedian and actor, lived from 1891 to 1973. The marker here on the side says he was the beloved husband, understanding father, and cherished friend. His courage in the face of trouble, his modesty in the rewards of triumph won over the love and esteem of people all over the world. His personal integrity and devotion to all people reflected the love of the Savior into whose hands his life is given. And I'm assuming that he's buried there, beneath that slab right there. Captain Don Evan was his son. He died tragically in a training mishap. This mentions Captain Don Evan Brown, commander 1st Squadron, 6th Ferrying Group, Air Transport Command, the United States Army Air Force in Long Beach. Killed in the line of duty October 8th, 1942 in Palm Springs, California. Also buried here is Catherine, his wife. She died in 1977. One of the most memorable roles that I saw him in was the 1951 film Showboat with the very beautiful actress Ava Gardner.
I want you to meet some of the greatest artists that ever played the river town.
He played Captain Andy Hawks, and he was known for, in that role, saying, "Happy New Year." I think he was drunk.
I was so darn drunk I didn't know what I was saying.
Great mausoleums up here, and right here is the grave of L. Frank Baum, writer of Wizard of Oz, and his wife, Maud Gage Baum. Now, Frank died in 1919. His widow died in 1953. It looks like some folks have left some mementos on top of his grave here. Lyman Frank Baum was an actor best known for his children's books, particularly The Wonderful Wizard of Oz and its sequels. He wrote 14 novels in the Oz series, plus 41 other novels, 83 short stories, over 200 poems, and at least 42 scripts. Despite his love for the theater, Baum tried to run a business and a newspaper unsuccessfully. He moved to Chicago and wrote for the Saturday Evening Post. In 1897, he wrote and published Mother Goose in Prose, a collection of Mother Goose rhymes written as prose stories. Mother Goose was a success. In 1899, Baum partnered with illustrator W. W. Denslow to publish Father Goose, his book, a collection of nonsense poetry. This book was also a success, becoming the best-selling children's book of the year. In 1900, Baum and Denslow published The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. The work was a best-selling children's book within 2 years. Baum went on to write 13 more Oz-related novels. Stage versions eventually led to the movie in 1939. On May 5, 1919, Baum suffered a stroke, slipped into a coma, and died the following day at the age of 62. His last words were spoken to his wife, "Now we can cross the shifting sands." Now the Baum grave is right here. But right in front are a number of family members. There's Frank Jocelyn Baum. There's an Elizabeth Baum. There's a Robert Baum. There's a Edna Ducker Baum. There's a Brenda Baum. There's a Harry Neil Baum. There's a Phyllis Ann Baum. And Robert Allison Baum. This is a very cool statue here. A baby and its mother. Check it out. Check the love between them. Again, some great statuary. This is for the Whitcower family. I understand that Leonard Whitcower, who lived from 1872 to 1956, he patented the nursing bra. Then there is the Schmid and Cottrell families, overlooking the beautiful burial grounds here of Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Glendale. So this gravesite area was roped off, but I broke the rules just to see the place where one of my favorite Western authors is buried, Louis Lamour. He lived from 1908 to 1988. He was a prolific Western writer. He wrote over 400 short stories and about 100 novels, as well as numerous TV scripts and screenplays. At the time of his death, there were about 200 million copies of his books in print. Louis Lamour was born in Jamestown, North Dakota in 1908. As a boy, he was captivated by stories of the Old West, including how his great-grandfather had been scalped by the Sioux Indians. These stories laid the foundation for his interest in Westerns. He spent years wandering and doing an incredibly varied series of jobs and experiences. He was an avid reader and collector of rare books. His first novel, Hondo, was published in 1953 by Fawcett Books and was his most popular book, selling 1.5 million copies. John Wayne purchased the movie rights and starred in the film by the same name. Fawcett also contracted Lamour for future Western novels. In 1962, Wayne also starred in How the West Was Won. Over 45 of his novels or short stories were made into movies, including Stranger on Horseback, The Burning Hills, The Sackets, and Shadow Riders. Outside of the Great Mausoleum is the unique gravesite of actor Gene Hersholt, who died in 1956. His gravesite is marked with a statue of Claude Hans, a Hans Christian Andersen character who left home to find his way in the world, much as Hersholt himself had done. The Danish-American actor is best known for starring on the radio series Dr. Christian from 1937 to 1954 and in the 1937 film Heidi. Hersholt appeared in a total of 75 films and 65 movies with sound. So this grave right here has a very sad story to it. This is Caryll Ann Ekelend, little sissy. As you can see, she was 4 years old. She was an actress in Bluebird. It was a Shirley Temple film.
Hammond, Humboldt.
Here. No, you don't. Come here. This is the third time you've tried to be born before your time. Don't you let me catch you at it again. Now go along. Go along.
On Halloween night, her dress caught on fire by a candle. She died several days later. Not a very nice way for a little girl to go. And she's buried right next to her father, Leonard Ekelend, who died a little bit later, quite a bit later, 36 years later. And over here is her heartbroken mother, Gladys, who died in 1985. At Caryll's funeral at Forest Lawn a few days later, her 5 brothers served as her pallbearers while a quartet sang her favorite song, Somewhere Over the Rainbow. She was buried with the toga that she wore as the unborn child in Bluebird. And this is the sister, Jana Lund. Actually, on this marker it says Jana Cosette Crowley. Jana Lund was the younger sister of Caryll Ann Ekelend. She performed on radio at age 3 and appeared in Argane comedies. In 1955, she joined the Johnny Carson show as a singer. Don't Knock the Rock in 1956 was her first film as an adult. Lund gave Elvis Presley his first on-screen kiss in the 1957 movie Loving You. In the movie High School Hellcats, she portrayed Connie, leader of the Hellcats.
Hey, where's old Lady Werner? Home with the flu. Look who we've got. A sub. A man teaching home ec. Woohoo, how wild!
As a singer, she was also a member of the Pied Pipers and the Roger Wagner Choral, the latter of whom she sang at the coronation of Queen Elizabeth II. So I found the grave of Robert George Young. Robert Young, famous actor, played in a lot of movies in the 1940s. He is probably best known by this generation as the TV actor who appeared in Marcus Welby, MD, the 1980s, I believe, 70s, 80s. And he's buried right next to his wife, who was Elizabeth Louise Young. She lived from 1910 to 1994. And Robert is actually buried next to his parents, Margaret C. Young, his mother, lived from 1870 to 1958. And next to his father, Captain Thomas E. Young, who lived from 1859 to 1941. Robert George Young, who lived from 1907 to 1998, was a film, TV, and radio actor best known for his leading roles as Jim Anderson, the father character in Father Knows Best from 1949 to 1954, and the physician Marcus Welby in the TV show from 1969 to 1976. Young appeared in over 100 films between 1928 and 52. He appeared with Hollywood's most illustrious actresses, yet most of his assignments consisted of short B movies, also known as programmers, which required brief 2 to 3 week shooting schedules. Actors who were relegated to such hectic routines appeared, as Young did, in some 6 to 8 movies per year. All this contributed to Young's depression, culminating in the suicide attempt in 1991. Later, he spoke candidly about his personal problems in an effort to encourage others to seek help. So this is one of the sadder graves that I'm going to visit today. It's that of Suzan Ball Long. And I recall that James Dean had heard about her death just about a month before his death. She died on August 5th, 1955, and James Dean would die on September 30th, 1955. And she was an actress. She only was able to star in about 8 films from 1952 to 54. Sadly, at a young age, she was diagnosed with cancer, and her right leg had to be amputated. That was in January 1954. That April, Suzan married actor Richard Long, who would later star in the Big Valley TV series. She insisted on walking down the aisle, fitted with an artificial limb beneath her wedding dress. If you can imagine, it took a lot of courage. She didn't feel sorry for herself. She didn't stop. She wanted to continue entertaining, so she became a singer on a nightclub tour in May of 1955.
I can make a good man stand, wish for things he never had. I can make
But 2 months later, she had collapsed, and doctors found that the cancer had spread to her lungs. When she died on August 5th, 1955, Suzan was just 21 years old. The couple was very much in love, and that inscription is very touching. It says, "Our love attends you on your new adventure." It was penned by the widower, Richard Long. So I found the grave here of Theodore C. Konopka. You know him as Ted Knight of the Mary Tyler Moore Show, which ran from 1970 to 77. He lived from 1923 to 1986. On the show, he played Ted Baxter, of course, that vain, shallow, bombastic buffoon of a TV anchor. Ted Baxter has come to represent the stereotype that news anchors are kind of these hollow people, rather hired for their looks and not their journalistic ability. His marker reads, "Dearly loved by his wife Dorothy, his children Ted, Elise, and Eric, his sisters, brothers, nieces, and nephews, his admiring peers, and millions of his adoring fans." And it also has the term "Bye Guy," which is kind of a variation of his famous line of "Hi Guy" on the show. He is buried here next to his unsung hero wife, Dorothy, who died in 2005. You might also remember that in 1980, he played in Caddyshack, the movie, playing a comic villain judge, Elihu Smales, who was also a co-founder of a golf course where the movie takes place.
Do you know what golfers can do to a golf course? Why, sir, I think they're tunneling in from that construction site. You better get rid of those gophers, or I'll be looking for a new greenskeeper.
He was the son of Polish immigrants who settled in Connecticut, and Ted was in high school when World War II broke out. He was among the first American troops to enter Berlin. Now, during his Hollywood career, he appeared in a vast array of TV shows, including The Wild Wild West and even Bonanza. Now, I'm here specifically in this courtyard to find another grave, and it's that of Lionel Stander. He was probably best remembered for a number of roles, playing a gruff, harsh-voiced, tough guy, or a lovable, gruff guy who acted tough but had a heart of gold in movies and TV shows. He is best remembered probably for his role of Max in the TV detective show Heart to Heart from 79 to 84, and you probably remember starring in that was Robert Wagner and Stephanie Powers. So his filmography included Hangmen Also Die, 1943, and other anti-Nazi war films during and after World War II. A lot of folks don't know that during the 1950s, amid the Red Scare, Lionel Standard was blacklisted for 10 years when the House Un-American Activities Committee discovered that he was a member of the American Communist Party. He claimed that his membership was only to make himself more attractive to women, but others testified that he was trying to recruit other liberal-minded actors to join the party. Standard was in strong support of the Russian version of Marxism and was known for spending many evenings with friends discussing the merits of Stalin's form of communism. In 1940, he was identified by the Congressional Dies Commission as a communist, and following his testimony, he was fired from Republic Studios. After being blacklisted by Hollywood in the 1950s, Stander worked as a stockbroker on Wall Street, yet continued to act on stage. Being a Christian, this is one of the graves that I was hoping to find, and I did find it. It's that of singer and actress Ethel Waters, 1896 to 1977. And as you can see on her marker, it's engraved with the title of the song that she was best known for, His Eyes on the Sparrow. She performed jazz, swing, pop music on a Broadway stage and in concerts, and she began her career in the 1920s singing blues. A lot of you may remember her as being the one who sang at Billy Graham Crusades.
Oh, sparrows and children, I know, and how I know, that he watches.
Most people don't know that Ethel Waters was the product of a rape, and she grew up impoverished. If she had been aborted by her mother, the world would have missed a huge blessing. Sadly, she said she was never cuddled or liked as a child. Ethel came out of her life of poverty by performing in traveling vaudeville shows. Her big break came in 1919 when she made a debut at one of the famous New York City Harlem nightclubs. Her soulful jazz style created a large fan base, and in 1921 she released her first recording. By the 1930s, she was recognized as one of America's brightest Broadway stars. In 1949, Waters was nominated for an Academy Award for her role in the film Pinky. She moved to Los Angeles to appear in the 1942 film Cairo. In 1939, Waters became the first African American to star in her own TV show, The Ethel Waters Show. In 1950, Waters was the first African American actress to star in a TV series, Beulah, which aired on ABC from 1950 through 1952. But she quit that role, saying that the portrayal of blacks was degrading. A turning point in her life came in 1957 when she attended the Billy Graham Crusade at the Madison Square Garden. Years later, she gave this testimony of what happened that night. In 1957, I,
Ethel Waters, a 380-pound, decrepit old lady, rededicated her life to Jesus Christ. And boy, because he lives, just look at me now. I look good, and I know it. But I tell you, because he lives and because my precious child, Billy, gave me the opportunity to stand there 18 years ago and sing at the old Madison Square Garden, His Eyes on the Sparrow, I thank God for that privilege 18 years later to still be able to say, with the help of these children, His eye is still on all us sparrows.
She was a fan of gospel music, and from 1957 up until her death, she sang regularly for the Billy Graham Crusades. In 1984, she was posthumously inducted into the Gospel Music Hall of Fame.
4 hours. Can you believe it? Didn't find everybody that I wanted, but I want to thank you so much for joining us on this episode of History Hunters. Well, thank you. Give us a like and a thumbs up. Tell your friends about History Hunters.